All right, welcome to a new-ish version of designing with NV Series Endpoints. I'm sure some of you remember all the way back when this was a much shorter webinar when it was just the NV32, and then we added the NV21, and I'm sure most of you are here just because you want to take a glimpse and take a little bit of a look into the NV1. So let's start off the way we always start off. For anybody that might be a little new, um, we always talk about the Q-SYS OS, and now that we're getting even more endpoints for our NV series, this really begins to leverage the power of why we call this, an ecosystem. It's not just a product; it truly is an ecosystem. So we've got our Q-SYS OS. This is, the brains of what we're doing in here for our software, our software platform that we're using. So we have our products, be it control, video, amplifiers, loudspeakers, all of those kind of things, cores. And then we have all of the third-party products that we work with, as far as, we've got plugins, we've got everything in Asset Manager, we've got all of our technology partners. And then there's just the open side, where you can take pretty much anything and, either use Block Controller or Lua to be able to have interaction with those pieces of equipment. But we want to start with the NV32. So the NV32 was our first video offering, and it has two modes that it operates in. So we have core mode and we have peripheral mode. So we're going to start by looking at peripheral mode. So this is where the NV32 can be either just an encoder or a decoder. We still can use the local switching. So if we're working as say we're working as a decoder, we can still use our HDMI ins are still a source. We've got our two HDMI outs, so we can take two separate video streams and put those to two separate displays. We have our USB-B port, so we can do our bridging right there if we need to. We've got our LAN ports. So again, we cover this quite a bit, but the NV32 is PoE++, or you can give it external power, but it does need 90 watts of PoE if you're going to give it PoE. We've also got analog in and out. Those come up on a 3.5 balanced or tip-ring sleeve connector, but it does present inside as two separate channels on the output side. The input side is a balanced input. So sorry for that. I've been fighting a little cough thing. Okay. So let's look at the NV32 as an encoder. So when we are set as an encoder, we can encode up to 3 HDMI sources at 1080, or we can do a single 4K. But right now we're going to look at a single 1080p or 3 1080p sources. We can also, when we are running as an encoder, we can still use HDMI output number 1. So we can use this as a 3x1 switcher. So we can use that as a courtesy monitor if we need to. We can also encode a single 4K 60 stream. Now, a lot of times we see people who want to do this, and they'll use one NV32 for every 4K 60 source. Now, that is true if you need to have them all available at the same time. However, if you are only ever going to need one of them at a time, you can still connect 3 4K 60 sources to the NV32 as an encoder. It will just only encode one of them at a time. And of course, we still get our local source on the output side. So let's talk a little bit about when we are in decoder mode. So we can decode a single 4K 60 video source, or we can decode two different 1080p network sources. Now we can also still use our local inputs while we're set as a decoder. So we can have three different inputs coming in and still use our one 4K output. Same thing with the when we're decoding 1080, we can still do two 1080p streams coming in, as well as do some local switching if we need it. So one of the big benefits about using the Q-SYS NV series is that it's seamlessly integrated into Designer. So you just bring in the blocks that correspond with the NV series endpoint you want to use. You bring in the source or the display blocks, and it makes it very simple. You get a lot of really good monitoring as far as being able to see what the resolution is coming in, resolutions on the output side of things. You can do hot plug triggers if you need to on sources. We get a lot of information when we're able to, bring that HDMI port or the USB-C port into the system. This is all accomplished by using what we call Shift. So this is our video codec that we use in the Q-SYS platform. It is a variable codec in that we only use as much bandwidth as we need based on the content that we are delivering. So in this case, if we're just looking at a static spreadsheet, we're not going to use as much bandwidth. Whereas if we get into a lot of full motion video, then yes, we would use more bandwidth. So we can also utilize the USB-B ports on these to give us the ability to bridge with our UC platform as needed. So this can either be on a BYOD device, or it can be with a dedicated, like an MTR or a Zoom Room or a Google Meet. But we can use multiple USB bridging points simultaneously. But the NV series includes the NV32 and the NV21, both have bridging points on them. So by having two outputs on the NV32, this allows us to serve up content for dual display rooms simultaneously by just using a single piece of equipment. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is the NV32 in core mode. So we've been able to, or we can switch this over from being a peripheral to being a core, which means that we still get all of our local HDMI video switching. We just don't have a way to have video, leave or enter the box. So we're using it as a core in this mode. So we can still use our bridge ports. We can still do local switching. This is used a lot with small huddle spaces and whatnot. You get all of the DSP features that you're looking for. You can have 32 by 32 network audio channels. You get 8 channels of AEC software, and or softphone, and you can still use the USB HID. You can still put the software Dante as well as the UCI and scripting license on here. Note that the NV32 is the only core that does not come with an 8x8 software Dante license, like all the like the 110 and the excuse me, the Nano and the 8 Flex. So any software Dante that you're going to do is going to require a software license. However, when we're in core mode, this lets us do things like take a dual output UC, run it in and out, as well as using the USB for the bridging, even for some BYOD. So this gives us a lot of benefits. Here's just a little breakdown. And before I go too much farther and people try to write some of this down, just a note that you will get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. Afterward, you'll get a recording of this and of this webinar, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint. So this just shows a little bit about what you can do in core mode and peripheral mode, the differences when you put them in and out. However, there is also now the NV32 core mode streaming feature license. So what this does is this allows you to combine all of the features of core mode with the peripheral mode where you can stream in and out. This lets us use it as a core as well as be able to stream or receive. You can use an encoder or a decoder when you are in core mode. Excuse me. You can then use the scripting or UCI license on here. All of the things that are done because we use software-based expansion on most of our devices. So this lets you, this lowers the cost of entry into purchasing the device, and then we just let you license whichever features you need based on that project.
Hey, Steve, let's take a quick little pause before we, I guess we could wrap this up. I've got a couple of questions stacked up in here, and I just wanted to address them. First off, okay. Scott Greenberg asked, I've had very bad experiences with local power for the NV endpoints dying. Any recommendations? If you go to our FAQ page on the Q-SYS website, there's under support, there's a questions there, and it talks, if you just type in like NV32 power supply, it talks about the ones that we've recommended as PoE injectors. And there's two different, there's a phi hung and a micro semi in there. But then there's an update that says internal testing and reports from field that internet operation is found using the following PoE injectors powering the NV32. These injectors are not recommended. So we list a couple of them in there. The Cuddy PoE 350s used to be pretty solid, but then a change happened on their manufacturing side. As far as external power supplies, you can certainly go on like Amazon and buy one for 18 or 20 bucks. 48 volts, 1.5 amps to 2.5 amps is kind of the range you look for. 2 amps is recommended for longer cable runs if you're having to do that. We also have a resource in there to talk about calculated drops. So we don't really have a recommended like local power supply, but I do know that some of those bargain basement ones last about a year because I've had them for as well. Anyways, so that's you can look there for some resources as well. Nathan Barlow says, with the NV32, are you able to do 1920 by 1200, i.e. 16 by 10 for all three, or does that limit you down to 2? I would think that's close enough to 1080p that we would still be able to do 3 streams out of the box as well. Would you agree, Steve? Because it's kind of a big limitation.
Yeah, I believe that is correct.
Yeah. That should fall within there unless you got a lot of high motion video. So it'd be something worth testing for sure. Jonathan Cox asks, is there any way to preview the HDMI input, or is there any plan to add that capability? I know there's been some discussions about that. I don't know if it's solidly a roadmap item, but there has been some discussion. Do you know anything more than that than I do, Steve? You deal with teams sometimes a little more than I do on the training side.
Just that it has been something that we've been actively investigating. We hear you. That is a feature that has been on our radar for a while.
And I am using an NV as a decoder with a 4K signal. Can I also use the USB bridge on the same decoder without sacrificing bridging quality? Absolutely. Absolutely, Steve. That you can certainly do that. It's not going to affect that as well. Probably part of the reason we limited it to 750 or 800 megabits is to allow the traffic on the network. So, all right. Well, that gets us back on track. Take her jump back in. Thank you much.
Yeah. All right. So we were talking about license. You can do those online through Core Manager. There is also an offline version of doing that if you need it. So I will, Dan, you want to talk through the NV21 real quick? You got to unmute first.
If I can get an AV guy in here to figure out my setup. So hold on, let me call desktop support. Yeah, so the NV21HU, obviously, you know, we in the Q-SYS platform, we start big and we go smaller, right? We started with big, you know, processors and we went down to smaller names. But kind of once we figure something out, then we kind of scale it back. So the NV21, it's a single cable. We have the opportunity to do a single cable solution on that. It also, one SKU can be defined as an encoder or a decoder. I always like to point out to people the naming conventions, right? Network video, NV21 is 2 in, 1 output, and HU is HDMI and USB. So it's right size. Now it's not quite half, you know, it's not a quarter RU, so it's kind of a third RU-ish. So a little over a third on that. But on size, physical size, but also on its capability, right? So, you know, there may be opportunities where you don't need that big of a device, that many inputs or outputs. And it's designed for Q-SYS. So, you know, obviously it's going to integrate into the system. You're going to use Q-SYS Designer software to configure it, just like any other Q-SYS. Go ahead, Steve. Oh, there we go. So if we take a quick look at the back of this, obviously auxiliary power. So we heard from enough folks on the NV32 that you really should shouldn't have the option of ordering a power supply from us. So this is a separate power supply you can order as a separate line item if you're not powering PoE. So it's still looking for a PoE type 3, but it's only looking for 60 watts. So it's or 802.3. But it's looking for type 3, so 60-watt power supply there versus the 90-watt that is required there. We have a USB-A port on the back, RS-232, so that remember, anywhere you see in Q-SYS an RS-32 connection like that, that's going to be a bidirectional RS-232 that you can drag into your system design and send or receive or both in and out of that RS-232. The USB-C port, this is going to be for AV bridging. And it will do AV bridging. It will also do video as well. It will also do device charging, but it will only do that if you have the auxiliary power supply there. So we beefed up that auxiliary power supply to be able to provide enough power to run this device, plus be able to charge a laptop or whatever's connected in there as well. The HDMI input is going to be like our typical ones that will do up to 4K 60, 444 video. And then the HDMI output on there, 4K 60, 444 video distribution as well, too. So go on to the next slide, Steve. Perfect. Single cable solution. So you can certainly use one connection for video distribution, audio and video bridging, and device charging. So all of those things can occur from there. So that makes a great companion, a little smaller form factor, fits under a table for a local input. Works great for that. So let's go to the, it does, let's go back one slide there. Q-SYS AV bridging feature license in there, but I think that.
That's gone away.
What's that?
That has gone away.
That's exactly right. That's gone away.
Well, so, the license hasn't gone away. It's still there if you're going to do touch panels, the USB-C on the back of the TSCs, but we are no longer requiring it for the NV21 as of it's either 9/12 or 9/13.
Yeah, I think it was 9. Yeah. All right. So go ahead and go on to the next slide there. Perfect. So it can be defined as an encoder or a decoder. Go ahead and go to the next one there. So in HDMI mode, you certainly could, in encoder mode, you can do an HDMI mode where you plug in, have your laptop in there, and then you could do a separate USB-C out of your laptop to just do bridging if you wanted. And then you could also use the HDMI out on there for a local optional competence monitor or a secondary output that you need. But you're only going to get, just like in the NV32, you're only going to get that HDMI or that anything that's on there locally. The other option there is you can do USB-C mode where single connection is going to give you everything you need from your video, your bridging, everything like that. Will we see USB? Oh, sorry, I got distracted by a question that came in, but I'll go ahead and answer it there live as well. Brandon Volberg asks, will we see USB-C on the NV32 at all? Probably would be, it'll probably come out as a different platform name. I don't see that hardware changing in the short term. So it would probably be when, another year or two down the road, once that gets deprecated out, that gets replaced with something like that. But good question. Sure. On the USB-C mode can be connected to we can still go out on the output side there as well, on encoder mode. So on decoder mode, same kind of thing. We can have an HDMI work as a decoder out. It's going to be able to take decoded content up to 4K 60 from the network and bring that as an output. And we can also show the local inputs out there as well. Same thing in USB-C mode, right? So we'll be able to have the content and the bridging with a single connection that is only going to be locally available to go out on that HDMI output there. So really small form factor solution if you got a huddle room or something like that. So, like we said, right size for your installation, not just physically is it a little bit smaller, but the I/O and the bridging there. So you can kind of see 2 inputs, 1 output, plus AV bridging. Same thing on the NV32H as well. Choose your right form factor and your I/O. All right, Steve, you want to tell us about the NV1?
All right, so here is the NV1. We had these out on display and we're using them at ISE this year. So this is a single channel HDMI wall plate encoder. This is really for spaces where your traditional surface mount enclosure might not be ideal. This gives you the ability to have this be in a wall box. You do want to be very aware of how much room you have in that wall box. For any of you that have dealt with wall plate form factor encoders or decoders over time, you'll know that these do generate quite a bit of heat. That is why it is, a double gang, because one side is just about getting heat out of it. So these take PoE type 2, so that is 30 watts. So that is PoE plus. They are single network port, so that is your LAN and your PoE and everything else that you need. They do have I'll back up to this a little bit. So there is an LED on the front that you can control. If you take the cover plate off, or that little, whatever you call it, that perforated plate off, there is also a reset button and an ID button. So just like you're used to seeing on most of our other pieces of equipment, however, it is accessible from the front. You do not need to take the unit completely out of the box if you need to do that. So once it's in, it's in. And just note that a couple of things. Number one, it is only an encoder. It is not a decoder. Obviously, it is only a peripheral. There is not any bridging on it. So this is truly just meant to be, put in a wall, or maybe put up on top of a podium, and to give you a way to connect in with a single endpoint. All right. I'll pause now for questions, of which I'm sure there are many.
There are. All right. let's see here. So Jarrett Perry says, is there a way to quickly automatically switch from USB-C and HDMI mode? Say we have a conference room and some laptops have HDMI output and some have USB-C for video. Would we just use an adapter? I would just have two cables there. If the content is not, if you're locking down your content to, somewhere in the 1080p range, then they can just choose either one depending on what they have on their back. So
so inside Designer, when you are putting in your source blocks, you get an output pin of logic for valid format. This is how we do it a lot of times, is we will just look at which one has valid format and use that to trigger which one we are routing out to the far end. So because that goes logic high and logic low as you connect and disconnect from a laptop. So I would do that.
Yep. Very simple. Is there a plan for an NV1 decoder, Nicholas Rob?
Lots of plans. I'm not sure where that is on the roadmap, but I don't think we're done with the NV series. Is it passive cooled, or is there a small fan on the right side? There is, in fact, a small fan on the right side.
All right, there we go.
Same question. Please make a USB-C version. That is something we are looking into.
Oh, nice.
That is a thing that we're looking at.
Anonymous, you're on a lot of these webinars.
Telling you. How much power can NV21 provide for device charging, Dan? The answer is?
How much power? I think 60 watts.
60 watts, that is correct.
All right. Let's see. What are the plans are there plans to create a USB extension wall plate for AV bridging onto the network or into an NV2132?
So that is an interesting, that question can have several answers. The first of which is, because our USB bridges are all network endpoints, theoretically we can already kind of sort of do that. However, there is also, if you're talking about actual extension, we can actually do basic driverless KM extension out of the USB-A ports on the NVs and other products that we have as well. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're getting at on there.
I kind of read it like, is there an IO USB bridge? Plans for something like an IO USB bridge for a wall plate?
Yeah, so that is definitely something that is on the roadmap that we are looking into, is basically a wall plate version of an IO USB bridge, or a QIO version.
Yeah, I doubt that we will have, QIO version might work, a little quarter rack view that you mount under the table. I would imagine also that we probably won't have any USB extension devices to go back, because the question also says to go back to the NV21 or 32. So probably would not look for us to develop a USB extender for the purposes of connecting to, say, a bridging port that's in the rack or in things. But good question. Let's see, come back to Jeff. Can you talk about routing PTZ cameras to a decoded HDMI output and any limitations on that?
Yeah, I was really curious as to what Tim Duncan was doing after he left the Spurs, and now we know he's in AV. Yeah, so the NV32 on output number 1, you can route a MediaCast feed to it and have cameras come out of there. So if you're feeding like an older codec that doesn't bring the cameras in over USB, it only wants to bring it in over HDMI, you can do that with the NV32.
Yeah, the NV32 will allow. Jeff Cattell asked, what is the MSRP on the NV1? I don't have MSRP off the top of my head here, though, but I would say reach out to your local reps there. They can let you know depending on where you're at. Or do you know off your head, Steve?
$1 million.
$1 million. Garrett Perry asks, is there any roadmap or plans of making any of the NV series devices a transceiver that can both encode and decode simultaneously? My 2 cents on that would somewhat be limited by the network, the bandwidth of the network port, right? So if I don't see that in the future, that would do both. But Steve, have you heard anything different than that?
Not. So I would say probably not as an NV series device.
All right.
I'll leave it at
that. Would be useful as the output. Oh, I'm sure Edwin's asking about the single channel decoder. Yeah, it would be great for behind the monitor. Absolutely. Anonymous attendee, must be a reason for the wall version USB IO is not available. I've been asking for years. I have been too. There we go. John Gazette says, specific example, client wants wall plate for USB-C AV bridge in the system, but closest location to connect to a wall plate to NV 21 or 32 is outside USB lanes, 25 to 32. Yeah, it's, it's a bit of a challenge there where they want to put it. You may have to get creative with a plenum box in the ceiling and come down 15 feet or something like that. So
yeah, I've seen that done.
Get a little bit creative on that one. If you talk about quantity 2 1080p streams coming out of the NV32 by inputting quantity 2 inputs, have done it with Zoom Room applications.
Yeah, basically you can have a decoder set to dual output. On that same NV32, you can bring in the 2 outputs off of any UC compute and then switch between an external source, a source coming from somewhere else, or that UC platform compute.
Tim Duncan, again, any roadmap for an HDMI encoder that would convert a signal to a MediaCast stream to allow for third-party cameras?
It's not going to be like that. It's just going to be the ability to take an AV stream and send that to a bridge.
Yeah. So it won't be something special. It'll just be a change in how our encoding process. We've never been closer. I haven't used that. That's the answer we get from our dev team.
In the NV21, encode 2 1080p streams on the network simultaneously. Yes.
Yes.
It can now. It didn't when it was first put out, but it does now.
All right. Well, we're caught up there.
Look at that.
Just in time for flexible and scalable.
Yay. Oh. All right. So just to recap, we've talked about how all of this is, excuse me, how all of this is designed to work together inside Q-SYS Designer and all sit on the network and play nice together. Now we want to go through a couple of installation examples using this equipment. So in this example, we've got a small meeting room where we've got 2 NV21s up under the desk for video and bridging for BYOD scenarios. We've got some NMT1s on the tabletop. And then we have an NV32 core mode decoding with the streaming license, meaning that it can be our core as well as it can receive from those 2 NV21s that are out on the table. We are using the analog going down to an SPA. However, this could just as easily be an SPA-Q. And then we have some local sources. We have some local sources of a PC and some sort of a wireless presentation. Right. This is a training room. So now we have some NV21s doing some decoding. We've got some NV1s on the walls as a place to connect and bring in our laptops. We've also got a Nano in here that's going to run our system. We've got our room PC. We've got some NV32s that are both doing some encoding from our UC platform and our cable boxes, as well as our CXQ amplifier. Here is my favorite, a restaurant. So we've got an NV1 up at the host stand. Maybe we're bringing in some custom content there. We've got our NV21s at all the displays. And then we've got some NV32s in here doing encoding with an 8 flex that's running our system and our CXQ. Okay. Edwin says, clarify, you said the audio input is mono balanced and the out is stereo unbalanced. They are both technically, so they're trying to figure out how to phrase this and phrase this properly. When you bring in the audio, you can either bring in a balanced mic input and just use the first input pin, or you can bring in two mono line signals on. I will clarify that while but it can be 2 inputs and 2 outputs, but it is on a TRS 3.5 coming in, which is why it's a little convoluted in the way we set it up.
Perfect. Oh, you've got flooding in there, Steve. Edwin Bucant says, please clarify that you said the audio input is mono balanced and the audio output is stereo unbalanced.
Yeah, that's what I was just looking at. Okay, clarification. I was wrong. They are both unbalanced. So 3.5 unbalanced. It's just on a TRS connector.
Yeah.
So 2 unbalanced in, 2 unbalanced out. The in can take mic or line. The output is just line.
All right.
1,000 apologies.
Are those drawings available to share? They'll be part of the presentation. Yep. But yeah, you get it with the PowerPoint as well. So mono balanced mic, 2-channel balanced line inputs. Okay, so mono. No, actually not. Edwin, it's
that came in before I clarified.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right. On the
restaurant example, you had 3 sources into the NV32. Can you route at this? How many of them can you route at the same time? All 3 of them. If those are 1080p satellite receivers, then I can send all 6 of these simultaneously and make a big matrix for all of these displays and my wall plate. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll give you the few minutes back here.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate everybody joining. Have a great day. Have a good start to the week as well. We're 2 days in, so there you go. Sorry if I missed this. Can I get a sloppy copy? It's like absolutely.
Yeah. Everybody will get a copy of this webinar, including the slideshow.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, everybody. Have a great day.